Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, we are diving into something I think we all experience, and that is nostalgia. You know that warm, fuzzy feeling you get for things from the past, and it's everywhere you look these days, right? Especially in pop culture, like everything old is new again. Which kind of leads to a really interesting question. Is anything truly original anymore, or are we just like hitting refresh on the good old days? And that's what we're tackling head on today with this fascinating article called Is Nostalgia Better Than Now? Revisiting our past to understand today's trends. Get ready, because this deep dive gets surprisingly philosophical.
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay, let's start with something near and dear to a lot of us. Toys. Remember that thrill of ripping open a Transformers box? Or like the hours lost in a world built with Legos?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
The article pointed out this huge wave of 80s and 90s toys making a comeback. We're talking Transformers, My Little Pony, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, they're back in a big way.
Totally.
And while the new versions, I gotta say, they look amazing.
Oh, they do.
Seriously, the detail is incredible. But it made me wonder, are they actually better?
You know, it's funny you say that because the article brought up this really interesting point about the actual quality of these reboots.
Yeah.
Apparently, a lot of collectors feel like something's been lost. The originals, with their sturdy plastic and metal parts, they were built to last.
Right.
But these newer versions, they often use cheaper materials, which makes you wonder about their longevity. Like, are we prioritizing flash over substance? It's a thought, isn't it?
Wow, that's so true. It's like that saying, they don't make them like they used to, really holds up here. And it made me think about He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. You've got those classic 80s toys, maybe a little rough around the edges, but so full of character, right?
Yeah.
And then you compare them to the figures from the Netflix reboot. Sleek designs, modern animation, it's all very impressive. But is something lost in that translation?
Exactly. And that's where this whole idea of repackaging for a new generation comes into play. The reboot might, click more with today's kids visually, but there's a certain charm, a certain tactile satisfaction that some argue is missing,
Totally.
It makes you wonder, are we actually improving these toys? Or just giving them a shiny new coat of paint for a different audience?
It's so true. Speaking of things designed to catch our eye, the article then takes us to the world of fashion. Kind of like toys, fashion seems to be stuck on this endless loop of revivals, doesn't it?
It does.
90s grunge, 80s neon, 70s boho, it's all back in style.
Yeah.
But again, does it hit the same way?
That's a good question. And this is where I found the article's comparison of clothing quality across different eras so fascinating. Like in the 50s and 60s, clothes were made to last. A dress or a suit, it wasn't just an outfit, it was an investment.
Oh, yeah.
Nowadays, we're practically drowning in fast fashion. Clothes are cheaper, mass-produced, and, let's be honest, often disposable.
Oh, 100%. I'm guilty of it too. And the article even uses the term throwaway fashion, which is a little unsettling when you really think about it. Will today's trendy crop tops and ripped jeans be seen as vintage classics in 20 years? Or are they destined for the landfill of fashion history? What makes a look stand the test of time anyway? Food for thought, right?
It is. It is.
Okay, so we've talked about clothes, but what about the music we listen to? It's kind of wild how much technology has changed how music is made these days.
Totally. Like, it feels like everyone and their grandma has a home studio these days.
Right, seriously. But here's the thing that really made me think. The article points out that even with all these new sounds and tools, so many modern tracks still have echoes of older ones. Hello, sampling, it's everywhere.
It's true, and it's not even just about, taking a snippet of an old song and dropping it into a new track.
Yeah.
The article talks about how entire genres today are basically built on the foundations of the past.
Oh, totally. It's like musical evolution, but it's happening within this framework of what came before. You hear it in everything, like all that synth-heavy pop that's so popular these days. Total 80s vibes.
Yeah.
Or modern rock with those raw guitar riffs, like echoes of decades past.
Absolutely. And it makes you wonder, what makes a genre or a sound truly groundbreaking anymore?
Right.
The article makes this really interesting comparison, I thought, between genres like punk and hip hop. Which were totally disruptive back in the day, right?
Yeah.
Totally new sounds that broke the mold, versus what we're hearing now. And don't get me wrong, there's some amazing music being made today.
Oh, for sure.
But it does feel like a lot of genres are kind of riffing on these familiar themes.
It's like, is originality even possible anymore in this crazy oversaturated musical landscape?
Yeah.
Or are we all just swimming in this sea of influences, consciously or not. It's kind of a trip when you actually stop and think about it.
It really is.
Yep.
And speaking of revisiting the past, we can't forget about Hollywood's obsession with reboots.
Oh my gosh, yes. Remakes, reboots. It's like they're stuck on this treadmill of reimagining anything and everything from our childhoods. Like the article uses Thundercats as a prime example, which I thought was perfect. I mean, you've got the classic 1985 series, then the 2011 reboot, and then there's Thundercats Roar from 2019.
Wow.
3 very different interpretations, but still, Thundercats.
It's true. And that's where the article brings up this like crucial point. It's not enough to just slap a fresh coat of paint on something old and call it a day.
Right. Totally.
Just because you can update the look of a show with fancy CGI and all these crazy special effects doesn't mean that you've actually captured what made the original resonate with audiences. Sometimes those rough edges that something the original had get lost in translation, you know?
It's so true. It's like, you ever see those like vintage car restorations gone wrong where it's like they're all gloss and no soul? It's like, are we doing the same thing to our favorite stories? Like, remember Blade Runner 2049? I feel like that was a remake that actually managed to capture the spirit of the original while still bringing something new to the table.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So it begs the question, are some classics better left untouched?
Right.
Where do we draw the line between paying homage and just churning out like hollow imitations?
It's a tough one, for sure. And speaking of things that have evolved drastically over the years, let's talk video games.
Yes.
I mean, the difference between like the arcade games of our childhoods and what you can play now is mind-blowing.
Seriously, the technology, it's just incredible.
It really is another level.
Yeah.
The article even mentioned games like The Witcher 3 and Red Dead Redemption 2 with their massive open worlds and graphics that look almost real.
Wow.
It's insane what they can do with technology these days.
Absolutely insane, I know.
It truly is another level. But here's the thing, and the article touched on this too. There's something to be said for those classics, you know?
Yeah.
Games like Super Mario Bros., Zelda, Sonic, those games had a simplicity, a charm that hard to replicate even with all the tech we have now.
It's funny, right? Like we're talking about these pixelated landscapes and stuff, but I'm over here thinking about how those old school graphics have a certain magic that today's hyper-realistic games sometimes miss.
Totally.
Like, don't get me wrong, I love me a good sprawling open world to explore.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there's something to be said for that retro aesthetic, you know?
For sure.
And those classic games, they were just pure, unadulterated fun.
Right. Like pick up and play, no tutorial needed.
Exactly.
The article even pointed out how some of today's biggest games, like even Minecraft or Stardew Valley,
Oh, yeah.
they kind of tap into that same like retro vibe.
Totally.
Makes you wonder if in some ways we're kind of circling back to appreciate that simplicity again.
It really does. And then you've got like the whole microtransaction and DLC situation.
Yeah.
Remember when you bought a game and that was it?
Yeah.
Like no constantly being nickel and dime for extra content. It's a completely different landscape now. Like
Yay.
the article brought up a good point too about how so many games today feel designed with monetization in mind from the get-go.
Yeah, it's true.
And look, I get it. Like game development is expensive these days,
It is.
but it does make you wonder if something's been lost in that shift, you know?
Yeah.
Like, are we sacrificing a bit of that gaming magic at the altar of profit? It's definitely something to ponder.
No kidding. And you know, zooming out even further, like this whole conversation about nostalgia and reboots and technology, it makes you wonder, are we living in a disposable culture? Are we so overwhelmed with content, with new stuff being thrown at us constantly that nothing really sticks anymore?
It's a really good question. And the article, like, touches on that too.
Right.
It's like, think about it. We binge watch shows, we scroll through endless TikToks, you know, we're jumping between songs on Spotify. Our attention spans are being pulled in a million directions these days. And I think, you know, in the past, trends had more staying power. I mean, there was simply less vying for our attention.
Right.
So what did exist had time to really like embed itself in our cultural consciousness.
That's so true. I remember wearing out cassette tapes and CDs because like they were all I had. Nowadays it's on to the next song, the next show, the next thing before you even have a chance to like really connect with it, you know?
Yeah.
And it's not just music and entertainment, right? Look at fast fashion tech gadgets that are outdated like a year after you buy them.
It's true.
It's like we're hardwired for instant gratification and quick turnover these days. So like what does that mean for the things we create and consume? It's a big question.
Right. And the article highlights how I think everything feels temporary in a way.
Yeah.
You know, music is all about the next chart topper. Movies are all about the next franchise reboot. Like each one trying to cash in on that nostalgia factor. It's enough to make you wonder if anything could break through the noise and become a true classic.
Right. It's a good question. So we've tackled some pretty big questions today about nostalgia, the pressure to constantly innovate, and this feeling of living in a disposable culture. But I appreciate that the article didn't leave us in a pit of despair, you know?
I like that too.
It reminds us that while nostalgia is powerful, it's not the be-all and end-all.
Yeah.
Each generation finds its own magic, its own things that resonate on like a deeper level, and that's kind of exciting.
Exactly. And this is where things get really interesting. The article leaves us with this thought-provoking question. Will any of today's trends be seen as classics someday?
It's true.
And if so, what will make them stand out from the constant influx of newness?
Right, like what will be the Star Wars or the Beatles of this generation, you know?
Right. It's such a good question.
It's a question worth pondering, and I have a feeling the answer might surprise us. So here's your homework for the week, everyone. What do you think will be considered a classic years from now? That game you can't put down, that song stuck in your head, that fashion trend you just get? What will earn a place in that, like, ever-evolving hall of cultural significance? Let us know. Until next time, happy deep diving.